Talk to me. I've been talking to you this whole time. A missable scene just after the climax of Pathologic 2 reveals that Zurkhen, the big heart under the town, is a part of the player's psyche. It's the heart of the earth, the heart of the town, the heart of the kin, your heart, and it's been speaking to you throughout the game when text appeared in square brackets. Up to this point, the player would have interpreted bracketed text as the Haruspex's own narration, and that's true to an extent. The big heart echoes your own thoughts. But Pathologic 2's files contain some 15 inaccessible moments where the heart spoke to you in dialogue to summarize and reflect on important conversations. This was meant to be more. In this video, we'll look at all of the scrapped big heart dialogue. First, we must ask a technical question. What is dialogue? Pathologic 2 supports 2 language localizations by default, English and Russian. You can mod in a whole host of unofficial translations by replacing one of the 2. To support changing languages on the fly, each line of text has a numeric ID, like 619-235-5000-584-185. All of the dialogue lines in a localization are stored in a file together. When the game needs to display dialogue, it looks in the data file speech.xml to find the numeric ID of the spoken line and the IDs of one or more possible replies. The actual text is loaded based on the player's chosen language. However, not all lines or IDs are accessible in Pathologic 2's scripted conversations. There's a bunch of dialogue in the files that isn't used. Dialogue lines aren't always stored in order, so it can be hard to tell where and when these conversations happened. Fortunately, we can peer into the scripting and find some artifacts that give us hints. By searching the ID of an unused line in speech.xml, we can find the name of the scene or event in which that dialogue was supposed to occur. I've made my best guesses at interpreting the exact timing and cadence where some of these dialogue lines were shown. Without further ado, let's get into the content. The first cut dialogue occurs with Lika the doghead as soon as you step out of the introduction. When you first interact with him, the big heart previews the conversation before you start speaking. A conversation about how the fight could have gone better and about innovative wound dressing. Let's talk. Not interested. This sets the pattern for most of the big heart's dialogue, a summary of the conversation about to occur, and an affirmative and negative option. Presumably the negative option would end the conversation then and there. The cut dialogue is concentrated near the start of the game, with about a third of it occurring on day 1. Before hearing about the game's survival and stat meter mechanics from Talon, the executor across the way, the big heart thinks, a long but useful conversation about survival in this unfriendly world. A conversation worth having. I don't have time for long talks. The other executor, Beak, gets this twice. Its dialogue is summarized as, a conversation about your recent past and likely future. I'd like to know that. I'll figure it out myself. In the Russian localization, the summary was rendered more like, a conversation about what just happened and what will happen in the next couple of hours. And when Beak tells you that you have the option to skip most conversations, you can take an immediate out by thinking, and this is where this conversation ends. Pausing for a quick note, unused lines shipped with Pathologic 2 isn't as deep as the rabbit hole goes. The Pathologic 2 Alpha, released to playtesters in August 2018, doesn't contain bracketed dialogue and gameplay at all, but there's more of it. A bunch of cut heart conversations only appear in the Alpha version's dialogue file. I'll mark those with an A on screen and in the chapter labels. When first meeting Lara Revel in the Alpha, the Haruspex would have thought, how long was it? Was it 7 years? I don't remember, and neither do I want to. In the game as released, Lara herself greets you with, how long has it been? 7 years? It would have been fun to have the big heart mirror her dialogue exactly, but this gets the same point across. Shortly afterward, you encounter the Changeling in an upstairs bedroom. Her claims that, you'll be the demise of your hometown, you'll drown it with blood, are summarized as, a conversation in which I am prophesied to commit horrible atrocities. I wonder. Bullshit, I don't believe in fate. We can estimate that all this dialogue was cut before the localizers got around to proofreading. When you meet the Bachelor in Rubin's apartment on day 1, the heart's first impression is pretty acerbic. An unpleasant stranger lectures me on the vicissitude of friendship and the things he believes I owe him. Who is this guy? Nope. The conversation doesn't go pleasantly if you follow through, with the Bachelor's assertion that he'll handle the entire plague situation himself, but I like the emphasis on confusion and wanting to figure out who he is. It helps balance the gamer logic of, I'm talking to this guy just because there's an option to interact. Notkin gets the most generous treatment because he has multiple conversations related to his quest in Act 1, internally called Trial and Black Mark. The first time he speaks to you is a discussion of a trial and the moral nature of murder. The heart's initial, although not very expressive, thoughts are, a trial for a murderer. There will be justice. Murder doesn't bother me. When he tells you about the soul into halves and asks you to take a leash item to Lika, it thinks. A conversation about how hard it is to judge a person you've never seen. I'm all ears, yet I've found a way. And before learning of Lika's final fate, it presents the options. A conversation about souls split into halves and the fate of traitors. I don't like this glint in Notkin's eye. We should talk. Not my business. Moving on to day 2. Here we find the first instance of bracketed text in the actual game, the Haruspec's thinking as he inspects Isidor Burach's body. This text serves a different gameplay purpose as connective tissue. The corpse doesn't speak back to you. The Haruspec's own thoughts are placed as both dialogue and reply. There are still options placed to end the conversation early, which registers as a constant undercurrent of resistance and strained emotion if you proceed through the examination. It's a nice effect. Isidor does get to speak shortly afterwards, as the Tumbler Human who guides you through the medicine brewing tutorial. He quizzes you on the 3 layers, blood, nerves, and bones, where disease can make itself apparent under the kin's traditional knowledge system. The lesson is summarized as a conversation about the structure of the world and the 3 culprits, about fighting diseases and crafting medicine from the most unusual resources. In line with the Haruspec's complicated and player-determined feelings about his indigenous heritage, the heart would have reacted with either, think, Burach, this is important, or, meh, those are old wives' tales. Another quick pause to comment that the Russian dialogue files of both the alpha and release versions contain more conversations than the English ones. This conversation, and others marked with an R, only appear in the Russian. Before sunrise on day 3, members of the kin gather at Aspides Hospice. A conversation about how people come here to learn to be kind and to solve complex questions of life by the ways of the kin. The Haruspec's reflections are, oh wow, now this place looks like a cult, not a hospice, or what kind of questions could they possibly have? That same afternoon, the alarm bell rings and you encounter the Bachelor again. He once more tells you to follow his instructions as he attempts to make a vaccine for the plague. A difficult conversation about what can be done in these circumstances and how the vaccine won't save the town. Let's talk. I know what I should do. This puts a bit more emphasis on the healer's differing goals and how frankly unimportant the vaccine plot thread is to the Haruspec's story. Bracketed text is sparse in the mid-game, so we jump to the evening of day 6, talking to little Measly at the train station. This is the event that starts Bad Grief's railroad destruction quest. A conversation about how the umbilical cord must be cut, not only during birth. How come? Run away from here. The heart is a bit creeped out by this strange child. Charming touch. Next, we get a dense block of dialogue that is used in the game. It starts with one of the game's most striking lines, in my opinion. When you go to visit your overworked friend Rubin at his apartment, the first thing appearing in dialogue is bracketed text. He's not dead, only sleeping. The relief that both the player and the Haruspec's feel at this thought is deep and personal. It's all the stronger coming from the big heart. In a similar vein, brackets are used to count time when Aglaya Lilich asks that you be quiet for 25 seconds. There's a lot of imagery here. The cadence of counting could easily be based on literal heartbeats. The Haruspec's comments that Aglaya has warm blood and a beating heart later that night, as her reflection reveals that she's trying to purge budding feelings from her heart. As it appears in Feverish Feeling in the Pathologic 3 demo, the symbol of the Inquisition itself is a heart. In the abattoir, for once, bracketed text appears as actions instead of merely thoughts. The scene of Nara's ritual sacrifice intersperses surgical cuts with dialogue. There is a right way to do this. The big heart won't tell you the correct sequence. if you choose the wrong bracketed options at first, Nara's death will be extended and painful. However, any set of choices will allow you to eventually craft a small heart and exit this scene. Finally, we stand before the big heart and it describes itself. A living heart of a giant creature. It's beating, barely. Talk to me. To me. I've been talking to you this whole time. You're the Udurg. Udurg. I don't know this word. Its speech can only reflect your words, but its thoughts are just as clear. The heart is present in your mind, if not your own chest. The last two cut conversations are the strangest of the bunch. They would have appeared in the conversations with Taya, Taichik, and Grace after they become infected on day 10. These lines aren't formatted as a set of dialogue choices for the player, but rather as multi-line dialogue from the children, as if the heart were speaking for them. From Taya. I just can't understand. Is this real, or is this a nightmare? Do you remember how you freed the kin? Still haven't freed the kin? Created the panacea like a real Mehu? Tell me about the abattoir, it's so interesting. The last line notably doesn't follow the sentence format of the rest. That, and the two fused options about whether you move the kin out to Zurkhen, suggest that this dialogue was an early draft or placeholder. Grace's line also refers to choices the player made. Soon I will be with all the other dead. There's nothing terrible about that. Do you remember how you spoke with your father through me, burned everything that is dear to me, fed it to who knows what, moved me in with this kind but very miserable man? All of the reference quests were optional, so this idea could have been dropped due to implementation challenges. Still, it's nice to imagine dialogue that references everything you went through with respect to the children in your care. Our journey concludes with one last canon scene of surgery on an unnamed man in the wrecked Broken Heart pub. It mirrors the opening scene of surgery on Piecework, which as a note didn't use bracketed text. The Haruspex thought with his hands at the story's beginning, but operating on a gunshot wound seems to require more logic. The other difference from Piecework's surgery is that the scene on day 11 is impossible to fail. Even the most rushed and violent choices leave the man bullet-free and likely to recover. This defeats the point of thinking through the options rather than using familiar game mechanics, but well, maybe you're a better surgeon now. Pathologic 2 does suffer from its rigid dialogue structure, NPCs nearly always needing to speak first to begin a conversation. Using the example of, and this is where this conversation ends, with Beak, the big heart could in theory also solve the problem of the player always needing to have the last word, by concluding with the Haruspex's private thoughts instead. My best guess is that the mechanic was scrapped when the developers realized just how many conversations the heart would need to summarize. Its narration still appears in key places throughout the game, twice when the Haruspex thinks about his loved ones, but mostly during surgery. Did you notice something about the surgery? When the Haruspex is performing his duties as a doctor, inspecting Isidor's body, and operating on the unnamed man, the bracketed narration uses capital letters. This is the same kind of square bracket narration used by the Bachelor during The Marble Nest, which also appears when thinking about medical cases. Dialogue coming from the big heart begins with lowercase letters, and so does the narration while you're vivisecting Nara. Is this surgery? Perhaps. Is it love? Who can say? In any case, the heart of the earth and the kin, your heart, was speaking to you the whole time. Special thanks to Isa A. Lilich for help translating the Russian text. If you want to remind me to make more videos like this, subscribe and leave a comment. I can be found at Pathologic on Tumblr, Blue Sky, and Nexus Mods, where you can download a bunch of things I've made, such as a mod to make little children gigantic in Patho 1. And as always, check out the Pathologic modding wiki at pathomodding.mirahees.org for community-made technical info and tutorials. Till next time.